Yes. Okay. So before introductions, we're going to ask another reflective question. And this is really going to set the tone for our next couple of minutes. And there's a reason for that. I know that we're here to talk about members converting into donors and why that's so important. One of the things I want you to go ahead and you can put in the chat, you can just sit with it, is to reflect as we're going through the next couple minutes of information. Who at your center or organization is really focused on fundraising today? Who is that? Do you think of a role? Do you think of a name? How many people? So just keep that in mind as we walk through the content, and we're going to circle back to that. And then without further ado, if you could please advance the slide, I will give a formal introduction on who I am and who else is joining us today. I hopefully have had the pleasure of meeting many of you. My name is Constance Miller, and I say that with a great deal of joy because I have worked in the nonprofit space for more than 16 years at this point, both in nonprofits, for nonprofits, and I currently serve on the local metro board of my YMCA, and I've served on other boards in the past. I'm a current fundraiser myself as well as donor. And then I'm joined today by Danny Lockhart, and it's just been a joy to get to know her. She's one of our friends at Funraise, and she is an expert fundraising strategist with a lot of experience working with both fundraising and technical solutions to do that with nonprofits across the country. And she has a personal passion for several nonprofits herself, including Stop Soldier Suicide and the Innocence Project, and WISE and other nonprofits across the country. So we are so happy that you are spending an hour with us today. Moving right along into what we're going to accomplish. We can go through the next slide. And then one of the things that I mentioned, the goal to keep in mind is who. So a really big headline today is, again, not only who our donors are, but who our members feel they are. So if we're talking about our members converting to donors, we love to start a webinar off with a quote. And I really want to thank our team for sourcing this one. For those of you who may just be listening in, I rarely read off the slide, but I'm going to do it in this case because I just love this quote. And it says, "The greatness of community is most accurately measured by the compassionate actions of its members." And so why this sticks with me so much is that as we think about who we are to an organization, we use certain labels. I'm a member, I'm a donor, I'm a volunteer. My kids go to preschool there. I learned to swim there. We have an identifier with us, and having really that concept of I'm a member of a nonprofit and I feel that philanthropic spirit is why we've been asking a couple who questions. Who are members to being donors, and then who at your Y is working on this, or who at your local association, your J, whoever may be joining us is working on that. So let's, next slide, please. For the rest of our time today, we've got some objectives that are how to take some tried and true philanthropic principles, and everyone here, again, like based on the nature of it, is probably already doing several of these motions. It's really how to apply it to this specific topic. So creating a culture of philanthropy that goes beyond your development department, that goes beyond some of our current tactics, and then some really practical hows. One of my favorite things about a webinar is we oftentimes have a topic we're really interested in, and it's very good to educate ourselves in what is going on. We really want to make sure that we leave you with some practical tips, some literal actions, and some tools to action these concepts as we move forward. All right, next. Okay, so as we consider who is fundraising and members also becoming donors, there's some really research and time-tested outcomes that happen as those identities shift within your organizations. And everybody can read at a glance. And I would love if you want to contribute in the chat, there's more that aren't present on the screen, because the outcomes that we can feel here about increased engagement, you've really got, again, a diversified, like optimized revenue stream for fundraising, and then really an increased like sense of belonging of your members, and just that overall philanthropic culture. There's more outcomes to doing this well and to leveraging these tools. I'm sure you at your local associations have felt that. Go ahead and let us know if you have. One of the things I want to challenge as we move forward here, because I'm about to switch from context to some findings that we have in just a moment, is that oftentimes when we're considering these topics, We are doing it from a place of opportunity cost. And what I mean by that is, I mentioned I was a board member. We set ourselves some pretty lofty fundraising goals. And oftentimes we're working with what we have, we're meeting those goals. So for a campaign, we're going to set a campaign goal and we may meet or exceed it. Where we find the member space and converting members to donors is where we actually have some room for growth and conversion that we're not even realizing we have. And it's going to help us perhaps set that campaign goal higher. It's going to create that recurring donation where there was a one time. So some of the outcomes that we're seeing to make these actionably real when it comes to data would be increased number of fundraising dollars in addition to everything that you see here. It's also going to be some downstream effects such as greater retention of members, greater engagement, some additional brand ambassadors, things like that. So we will move, next slide, please. We'll put some numbers to that in just a second. Okay, so as mentioned, I know that everyone in this call is already doing something about this. It is very rare, and again, just from chat in the chat, that there's not already a discussion around this. We have active campaigns. We have asks in the lobby if you have that in your facility. We have some motions around this. But one of the things that data tells us, and then our experience from working with nonprofits for a really long time, tells us is that the way that it's being done across associations that's what really varies. We see many different tactics of how to effectively engage staff in fundraising, how to effectively convert members to donors. So what that looks like is what we find many different versions of, and that we really want to talk about some of the best practices that we're seeing for this member conversion. So that's a lot of information. I want to go ahead and get to some data immediately because I mentioned opportunity cost here. This all sounds really good. And the reality is that on any given day, when we pull data, I think most of you know we work with hundreds of nonprofits all across the country. And we've looked at this number for the past 10 years, the number of our members who are also donors. And this even includes normalization for COVID. On any given day we pull, we find that the average member who's also a donor is about 6 to 7% of your active households that also identify as a member. And only half of those we see as giving more than once. So when we talk about this topic, no matter where you are in a spectrum of really being above that 6 to 7%, we're still looking at a huge opportunity to deepen that engagement, have that identity grow from a member to a donor. And then also, again, have that share of your revenue growth from fundraising see really some pretty remarkable results. So 2 more quick data points for you before we get to our how. One is, if you can go to the next slide, we already know that a major way that everybody who's joining us has probably pivoted in the past couple of years. And again, we kind of mentioned how long we've all been doing this, is the way we've been making the ask and to our members has changed. I used to get flyers. I still get some in the mail. Handwritten notes are great. We also know that online donations, of course, was a next wave of offering. And then something that we're all probably familiar with and have participated in ourselves are really those text to give opportunities. So if we can engage donors on their mobile phone, not just through a positive mobile experience, but from a texting to give experience, we're seeing those numbers consistently adopted. And you can see here, we will share these slides where it's being used by the majority of nonprofits to some pretty interesting ROI results. I mean, from the amount of donations that are occurring to the fact that they're also, as you can see here, growing subscriber lists. So growing your reach when you're doing targeted messaging. And then really having that membership engage with your organization in new ways as we go forward. So next, as you can see, kind of, again, if we can go to the next slide, please, on what this really means for a wallet. So let's make this real with intentionality around everything that we've talked about. Who is asking, the way that we are approaching the conversation with our members and our facilities, when that is intentional, again, to kind of close this opportunity gap from that 6 to 7% to a deeper engagement. If you can see on the slide, we've got just from one customer's example of doing that for a year, an 80% increase in the results of a campaign. And that is from taking that strategy and actioning it with their staff, and in their intentional messaging, so that everyone in the organization felt empowered to be part of a campaign. So next slide, please. When we mentioned at the very beginning of the webinar, who at your staff is doing this, like who in your walls is doing this? This is one of my favorite questions to talk with nonprofits about, because it is one of those answers that varies the most. I hear everything from our front desk staff knows how to do this to, oh my goodness, they only our development staff does, and everywhere in between. And the reason why this is so important is because there is ongoing evidence, again, from closing that gap to increase the donor rates, to increase the donation themselves rates. When we can empower staff who are interacting on a daily basis with members to be able to speak to why you would give, to be able to speak to the difference between a member experience to a donor experience, and have that conversation be part of their training, have that conversation be part of assets that they're provided, and really give them some easy ways to do peer-to-peer fundraising. Those things are what we are seeing being very effective, moving that conversion. Okay, next, please. For those of you who may already be familiar, I know we've got several YMCAs on this webinar. There is a Y event every spring called NATO, and it is focused on fundraising. It is a fantastic event for those of you who've hopefully been able to attend, who are part of a Y. There are volunteers and donors and staff who come together. And I was fortunate to be part of a roundtable where this was the topic. It was a fantastic discussion. And one of the things that we wanted to mention was the way that this conversation at local organizations is happening, and some of the big learnings that we took away. So if you can go on to the next slide. Okay, this is when we pivot to how. So we kind of have this concept of who is asking. Do they know how to ask? One of the biggest conversations that we want to help with on this call is surfacing that when we have intentional training of and tools for our staff, that is where we are seeing some fantastic tactics at local organizations. So one of my favorite pieces that we had was a local organization who shared that they have, as part of their staff onboarding, regardless of who they were on that previous slide, whether it was a childcare director, a front desk staff member, they were all in their onboarding given a one-pager of the difference between where membership dollars went and where donor dollars went. They were all taught to not only have the why are you here and what are your goals for why you are joining this organization. So I mentioned I worked at a nonprofit. I'm just going to speak for myself really quickly because this was a learning from NATO. I've been part of many facility tours where I entered. I was so excited, to be part of the organization, and I've had some different experiences with people understanding why I was there. And why this mattered is because as our staff who is getting to know those members who walk in the door, engage with them, sometimes it is for a health goal. So I'm just going to speak for myself. It was to be healthy. And sometimes why I chose the organization was because they had a space for my family to be. And where that became a learning from NATO is that if we can have the bridge between something that I'm there to accomplish and why I chose your organization, and then for our staff to recognize where there are signals of passion, of things that I care about, that is where we have the ability to shift from what does this member want to accomplish to what could they get excited about, that I could communicate with them the impact our organization makes in that area, whether it's with youth. In the case of why I became involved in the YMCA, is it was a place my children could go. My child went to preschool there while I also was engaged in a Group X class. and then have that conversation of educating them on the child program that we had, not so I could participate in them, but so that I could become educated in the impact that they had, and then be asked to support it. So you can keep going. How to identify potential donors is exactly the level of engagement that we already know to do with that membership example of why we may join, why we may be there in the first place. What we really see often is that it's a very different skill set. If I'm engaging you for a membership opportunity or a program opportunity, then if I'm engaging you to identify signals that you're willing to donate, that you're willing to recognize us as a charity, give $5, $10, those are two different engagement motions. So I think when I say learnings from NATO, this is where we really get into how. I've been involved in recruiting for membership sales. I've also been involved in asking for fundraising donations, and I have written grants. I know many of you have as well. It's a very different skill set. And there was a point in my career where I was much more comfortable sitting down with a large donor asking for an ask than I was walking around a facility engaging with someone I just met and having a similar conversation. So I think having, again, that concept that as we have an identity as a member, we can also teach our staff how to listen and how to communicate, not only, again, for that membership renewal or that program sale, but also for that ongoing education and identification and listening to where there's opportunities to be a donor. So if you can, next slide, please. Okay, so these are real quick cues. We're going to breeze through the rest of these slides because I know everyone's going to get the slide deck. One of my joys is when, again, we learn to hear things differently as we're having conversations. So we just put some cues in here of examples of wherever, maybe it may be your preschool teacher, if you have that programming, maybe it may be your fitness floor director, your group X. When you hear about their personal goals, that absolutely keeps that awareness high of the impact that you have, but it's really giving some specific examples on this slide of cues to listen to that have this ability to create that culture of philanthropy where I'm not only being like a great group X instructor, but I've now been trained, I've now had the expectation that I'm going to listen to a cue where I might have an opportunity to ask them to contribute. And that is, we really put some really crisp examples in here of, again, it's listening for that passion. It's listening for that testimonial of the difference that you've made in their lives. And so again, next slide, please. Okay, and then again, it comes down to empowerment. So if you can't tell, I'm beating a very specific drum, which is so many on this call know how to make an ask. We know how to write the good thing. We know how to send an email. We know how to fundraise. What we're finding when it comes from members to converting to donors, the headline is involving everybody else. It's involving them in how other people who aren't in our development orgs learn to make this ask, and then giving them some of those real quick wins, real quick scripts on how to listen differently for it, a couple really easy value props to share, and then to encourage them to practice with the rest of the development team or whoever it is, those types of basic interactions. Again, it takes practice. Having that being part of the entire staff org, no matter what their role is, that's what we're finding is changing this topic in organizations. It's when everyone who's in the facility practices as part of their staff role. Okay, next. Okay, scripts to the ask. And I see a comment in there that I love, which is, how do you respond to someone that says, this is not my job and they don't want to ask for money? When I was much younger, much earlier in my career, I would have felt that way. And one of the things that we're commonly seeing is that if I'm gonna do front desk, because when I was younger, I had a similar role, and my job was to be welcoming. My job was to educate on where everyone could find things. It was to make sure that they knew where they were going and everything that there was to offer them, but it wasn't that. I would have felt uncomfortable making that ask again when I was starting my career 20 years ago. And I think one of the things to empower with our staff is exactly some sample scripts. So I've got 2 quick answers to this, and then I'm really excited to hand it over to Danny because she's got some very practical answers to ways to solve for just this. One is setting the expectation that this isn't different. So again, when we say converting members to donors, when we think of our membership dollars, some of our members already feel like, I pay you a membership fee, or our front desk staff, I'm here to tell them where Group X is. That's why we led with the culture of philanthropy being the game changer here. Because when we set the expectations that as you engage with the community, as you talk about everything that we do, that you are a fundraiser, whether you are increasing awareness that we're a charity, or whether you have a couple quick scripts that you've practiced with your own staff in a safe team meeting on how to say, hey, would you be willing to contribute $5 today? Or here, I have some extra information for you about where our donor dollars go. That's very different than a more direct, perhaps more intimidating ask. And this is where I think development staff are so fantastic because we're also skilled in making really big efforts. Having someone feel like they are empowered to have the small conversation that cultivates a donor and that they are aware in their role in cultivation and how important that is, that's vital. Because essentially what we're doing is we're nurturing our members to become donors all the time. And then it really takes just a couple very clear fact sheets, very clear scripts that they can use. And again, that accountability to practice, like, hey, let's walk through this a couple of times. And we do know that if I, go to Group X class all the time, and I go to Danny's Group X class and I love it, and I have such a good relationship with her, and she knows why I'm there for my health goals or for whatever else. And she, at some point when we have that relationship, has that conversation with me, I'm more likely to say yes. So giving our staff the identity that on some spectrum, they are nurturing donors all the time, and they may be asked to have some very clear conversations that we help remove the barrier for around intimidation, and we give them some fun ways to do it. That's really the way forward that we've seen move that 6 to 7% penetration up to 10 or 13. So we have some organizations in our data set that are over 13. We have one as high as 17, and this is what they're doing. It's very, very intentional as part of staff training. Not to say everyone here has to be a fundraiser, but to say everyone here contributes to the overall success of our donations. Okay, Danny, I'm about to hand it off to you in a minute. I'm excited to see where we're going. All right, so again, I will go ahead and hand it off in the interest of time. We've got some summary slides here on the effectiveness of closing the loop. So as we do all these things, making sure that we share stories out, making sure that we are learning, kind of having that what's working, what's not. There's no wrong way to do this. The only, wrong way to do it is to be nervous to do it. And then having, again, that personal touch, as I just mentioned with that Group X extractor. It's such a clear example, but it's so true that if we can have both a public thank you and a public recognition and just encouragement that it's part of the involvement with the organization, we're seeing that retain donors much longer. All right, next up.
All righty. Well, thank you, Constance. I'm so sorry for kicking things off. Those are some really valuable strategies there. And what I love about this is that there's so much overlap in the suggestions that you've made in terms of relationship building, training staff to fundraise, and the way that we approach fundraising technology here at Funraise. For a little bit of background, I am an account executive and fundraising strategist at Funraise. We are so excited to be partnering with Dakxo to help you all bridge the gap between members and donors, and even just help boost overall fundraising. I've been with Funraise for, it's now just under 6 years, and I've spent that time really getting to know my nonprofit clients, the challenges that they face, and ultimately helping them resolve those challenges through innovative technology partnership. Again, I'm really excited to be here today. Thank you all for being here. If I look familiar, maybe we've met at NATO. Maybe my name has popped up in your inbox over the last 6 years. In fact, I already saw a few folks that I've been chatting with or current customers that have popped up in the chat as well. So just really thank you for showing up. before I jump in, I'm going to throw my personal meeting link here in the chat as well. If anything that I'm discussing catches your eye, or you want to learn more or continue the conversation, Matthew, I saw you posted a question there that seems pretty applicable to perhaps a conversation. Let's do that. And then we will be opening it up for a Q&A, time-oriented here at the end. But really, now that we've had some time to talk strategy with the Dakxo team, I want to provide 3 very practical strategies that my clients are currently implementing for turning members into donors, and specifically boosting annual campaign revenue. So those 3 strategies, we're going to be looking at, first and foremost, peer-to-peer. That is my all-time favorite way of fundraising. Specifically, we'll be looking at how you can activate peer-to-peer fundraising with your annual campaign, or even leverage, like Constance mentioned, some of those staff members or other folks that want to be involved through peer-to-peer fundraising. Number 2, and probably most important, is not just asking for the donation, but communicating the impact of a donation, the why. So Constance touched on this as well. We're going to see how we can tie in technology to do that also. And then thirdly, might seem like a no-brainer, but making it as easy as possible for donors to give. You're putting in this work. We are stewarding these members. We're driving conversion. The last thing we want is for that experience to feel cumbersome. So today I'm actually going to screen share and show you some real life examples. In fact, I think at least one team member from the example that I'm sharing is here. So kudos to you. We're going to be showing you off a little bit. We're going to start here with the Los Altos Family YMCA campaign. So this is part of the YMCA of Greater Long Beach. Shout out Long Beach, lived there for many years. Glad to see your team is here. This organization uses Funraise in conjunction with Dakxo to run their annual campaigns. And this is for their multiple branches. To date, they have raised over $1 million and have grown their revenue 160% with our tools. So they're a prime example of how to put these strategies we've discussed into action. We have tons of clients that are doing this, so shout out to you all, but excited to see how others might get inspired by this as well. But so what you're looking at here is that campaign page. This is built on Funraise, which made it really easy for them to launch a professional landing page for their campaign. As we take kind of just like a quick cursory look at this page, we can see that it's well branded. It's very clear in terms of who we're giving to, what we're fundraising for. My guess is most of you all are joining via laptop or desktop, but I'll take my word for it. It's also very mobile friendly. And what I love about this is we can already see they are more than halfway towards their $300,000 goal here. So yay to that. And they're putting into work the 3 strategies that I just mentioned, which are peer-to-peer fundraising, spelling out impact, and making it easy to donate. So first, along with really clear donation options, this organization is encouraging their members or supporters or staff members to create their own fundraising pages. This is what I mean by peer-to-peer fundraising. So we can see lots of individuals here have created their own pages. Each of these fundraisers have their own goal that is contributing to the overall fundraising goal for this campaign. As an individual, they can create their own pages, share why they're fundraising or why they care about the why. This fundraiser gets extra bonus points for sweet photos included. But what I love about peer-to-peer fundraising is it really enables these fundraisers to activate their own communities. I mentioned that it's one of my favorite strategies for fundraising, and that's because, while this fundraiser may or may not have had $12,000 check to write to their YMCA, he certainly has 39 folks in his community that have helped him reach that goal. And peer-to-peer campaigns are an excellent strategy for member-based organizations because they enable your members to do more than just donate. Your members can now be reaching new donors, new potential members, and giving you a larger reach and therefore a larger audience to steward. It's easy to see the impact here. We can see the donors giving to this fundraiser's page. These donors gave to this annual campaign because this fundraiser asked them to. Your community is full of potential donors, and your current members are some of the best ways that you have to reach those potential donors organically. Now, if we go back to the campaign page here, let's look for strategy number 2, which is communicating the impact of a donation or contextualized giving. So as we scroll through this page, I can find that very, very easily here. These donors gave to this campaign because folks asked them to, and because they understand why that gift is needed. Constant mentioned this, but there are members that give fees to your organization, of course, and not all members understand how or why their donation is needed. So impact sections like this that clearly spell out and educate to members how else they can support your organization are a great way to start that conversion here. Rather than just asking them to, hey, make a donation, ask them to make a specific impact. Hey, help us grow our aquatics program. This communication can help strengthen the relationship with a donor because they have a better understanding of how they're actually empowering their community. These days, people want to know how their gift is making an impact and where those funds are going. So we can make that really clear. We can really kind of dive into the emotional context that drives donor conversion. And then if we're looking at the third strategy here, it's a great example of making it easy to donate. So we can see quite a few calls to action, quite a few ways where we can go and give. Again, I mentioned this before, but the biggest reason that people donate is because they were asked. The next biggest reason is because it was easy to. They were able to do it with the amount of attention that they were willing to give that task. And let's face it, these days, there's a lot competing for our members' and donors' attention. So I recommend asking yourself, when members visit your site, are you making it easy to donate? I would recommend walking through your own giving experience if you haven't lately. Is it loading quickly? Does it play nicely on your cell phone? How much friction is there from start to finish? Does it take you very long to complete that gift? Can I use Apple Pay? That's my preferred way of paying. But all of these things are things to consider and review. And when we look here at this campaign site, we can see that they're doing just that. So this opens to full screen over the site itself. If they aren't making an impact amount, they'll be able to select their amount. And what's great about this form is there's a variety of bells and whistles that can be added, like dedications, comments, automated company match. Plus, like I mentioned, a ton of payment methods. So Apple Pay is one of those, crypto, stock. Again, widening the variety for folks to be able to give. This form in particular is built to increase conversion as well. We see about a 50% conversion rate with this donation form, which we're really thrilled to see. And then it's also a great representation of recurring giving. They've got kind of all the options turned on. That way a donor can select to give a monthly, quarterly, or annual gift. And now there are a ton of features in this form that can help support recurring giving, like upsells. I'm not going to cover all of that today, but what I will say is that the main point here is that it's easy to donate. And it's worth noting too that this donation experience, while we're looking at it in the context of this annual campaign, a lot of our clients are also bringing this over to their homepage so that they can have that same experience embedded just on their site. That way, no matter where your members are being called to ask or give, they can do that directly. But I promised a couple examples, so I also want to show their Camp Oaks annual campaign as well. So what I love about this is we're kind of shifting gears. We can see the design has changed, but the strategy hasn't. So this organization is very, very close to completing their annual goal here, which we're excited to see. And we can see that they're celebrating donors as they come in. We're educating folks as they go to the site to learn more about the programs, the camp itself, and we'll see all three strategies in action here. So up first, really easy to see that they're clearly communicating the impact of a donation. $750 is going to provide a full scholarship to a camper. $500 is going to empower a counselor in training. So check mark, we see we've got clear communication of impact. If we scroll back up, we can look for fundraising here, and spoiler alert, they've got that turned on as well. So we've got individuals contributing to this campaign, with these fundraisers bringing in not only thousands of dollars, but again, new potential donors or members to this campaign as well. So A+ on that. And then because we already know this is a campaign site on Funraise, we know that giving experience is going to be really pleasant and easy to navigate. So again, a really good example of all three strategies put into action. Now, I want to shift a little bit of gears here and show you how these are actually built. It's actually much easier than you might think. First and foremost, our clients are not having to build these pages from scratch, if you're wondering. We offer templates that come out of the box that can provide our clients with a good base point to just start plug and playing their own images, logos, and design into these pages. Now, they can be as binary as this. We also expose all the code if you've got a coder on your site that wants to get even more flexible with it. But to give you a quick peek behind the curtain, so to say, I did go ahead and just recreate the site that we're looking at. This took me about 5 minutes to pull in their photo, add their logo, and customize the color here to match their brand. But what you're looking at, again, is that site builder. So as I hover over every component here, really easy to go in and make changes. If you've ever built anything on Squarespace or Wix or anything like that, you'll find this really intuitive. Personally, I had not, but again, really easy to go in and do. If you click the plus sign, you can add more components. So you know what, let's add our impact tiles here. Maybe we've got 4 different asks. We can go ahead and add that very easily. Again, I'm not a whiz at this, and to do this in front of a large group and talk at the same time, I think just goes to show how easy it is to go in and add those 3 strategies. You can turn on that peer-to-peer fundraising. We've got built-in emails to send out to those fundraisers so that they're staying on task throughout their journey of fundraising. Again, from a branding perspective, you can customize it with your fonts, your sites, your colors there. So there's a lot that I could probably go into on this, but that kind of covers the 3 areas that we're looking at today. And if you want to learn more, of course, you can do that. But we've talked about strategies, we've talked about fundraising channels. The last kind of unspoken piece to all this is really being able to measure and report on performance. So campaigns are, of course, an active living thing. So while sure we can look at the data at the very end of a campaign, that doesn't do us much good if we can't look at it live and in real time. So what we recommend is using a fundraising performance dashboard where you can review overall performance of a particular campaign. You can rally, of course, behind your successes. Hey, we had a really awesome day. Or, make adjustments in real time if you need to. So what you're looking at here is, again, part of the Funraise platform where you can start to see some of the intelligent dashboards that we have. What we're looking at here is an example of like an annual campaign dashboard. So you'd be able to see things like general stats around like how many donors do we have for this campaign? How many of those are recurring? Maybe we should reach out to those other 15 and see if they'd consider a larger impact. You can track how you're progressing towards your goal. We can see how much we're raising by day. Also, if you're not tracking retention year over year, you could do something like that here. It's a great way to see if donors are returning each year, or you might have a high priority list of people that have given but haven't given again yet this year. Again, closing that gap with those percentage of members to donors. Also, if you've activated peer-to-peer, which you should, if you're implementing these strategies, you can also track performance here as well. So number of fundraisers, how much they're raising, signups per day. Looks like 6 p.m. tends to be a popular time on a Tuesday. Let's make sure to send out an email at that time. You'll also want to be sure to thank your top fundraisers and have an eye on them. Maybe celebrate them at your next event, whatever it might be, but you'll have the ability to do that within a performance dashboard like this. But I'm going to go ahead and stop here. I really could talk about this probably for way too long, but I know we've got limited time here. I see lots of good questions coming through the chat, and we can open it up for that there. But that said, again, if you want to learn more or pick my brain, you certainly can. Let me pull up our campaign here and we can get back into the dashboard. But ultimately, I'm just excited. I hope that you're feeling inspired by what we've shared so far. I hope that you can kind of see the overlap between the strategies that Constance shared and the ways that you can tie or leverage your own technology into this. And I hope you're feeling excited to start kicking things into high gear when it comes to leveraging your members, growing your fundraising. we've got our integration coming up very, very soon. So we're excited to dive into that. And again, like I said, we'll go ahead and open it up for questions here and dive in there.
Yeah, and I want to add just a little bit more
Go
on the
for it.
integration because I see some of the questions about when is the integration coming. I'm very excited to share that it's actively in pilot right now, and which means it will be we're on track for being live this summer. So there will be a lot more information. We want to make sure we get you all the latest and all the documentation you would need for all the details of that integration. But I am like thrilled to say again, genuine smile, you guys, as a fellow fundraiser, to say that it's in pilot with a goal of this summer. So there'll be a lot more coming on that soon. I also want to go through let me see, go through you guys roaming through the chats here. I've tried to keep up as I can. I don't know if some of you on the call know this because I recognize some of your name, but I love the data question. There was one about where did the 6, in no particular order, I'm gonna jump around, where the 6 to 7% came from. That's of all active households as of right now. So I've pulled this number dozens of times. I used to pull it about once a month, and then it stopped changing on me for like 10 years. I mean, I can go back and re-pull data. And that's the median. That's truly a median. So I don't know if you guys know that that's literally the midpoint. It's not overly, conflated by outliers there. So what that means is that whenever we pulled this number, and again, as recently as Q1 of this year, it was of active units in Dakxo operations. And again, that's across any type of nonprofit that leverages it. So that'd be YMCAs, JCCs. It's very large. So we've got a really rich base there to go off of. It has an active member also logged a donation, and then over the course of their current membership, have they logged more than one? So that is, we can re-pull it again, but we're really hovering with that as a very common midpoint, 6 to 7%. I like to say 6 to 7 because on a good year we get closer to 8. And then when I kind of look at those high performers as we're pulling data, we have some organizations that I've actually had conversations with as recently as April that says, help, we're at 2%, we're at 3%. And then we've got some who were those best practices from what we represented today in the call came from, where the way they're training their staff to be, in the ways that we talked about the front end. Those are the ones where I mentioned, if you look at that other end of the spectrum, they're up around 17 to 20. But to answer where that data came from, it is from the aggregate analysis of the hundreds of organizations who log into the system. So let's see, we've got that it's in pilot right now, active development, more to come this summer. And then the data question, I'm going to jump around. Let's see, do you see any you want to tackle, Davey?
Yeah,
And then I'll
I
jump in.
saw
We can go back
some,
and forth.
just asking about manual entry. And I
Yes.
see, thank you for our current customers to answering questions. You guys are hired. But yeah, so the goal is upon release here, that manual entry will not be needed. So typically what I'm recommending is schedule some introductory calls now if this is interesting. And then as we kind of roll through this conversation, we'll be rolling it out so that all of this information will pass over into Dakxo seamlessly. You can still use Dakxo as like your ultimate source of truth, be able to see programmatic and membership data, and then also be able to see that fundraising data come in and kind of help fill the gaps when it comes to the fundraising areas that that we know are needed here and that are the reason that we've kind of chosen to participate in this partnership.
Okay. Let me roll through here. Other stuff. Hold on. I'm going from the bottom to the top.
You're fine. I'll chime in with ones I see too. It looks like, in terms of those sites, that our clients are building those. We provide the templates for them so that you don't have to start from the ground up. But all of our clients are empowered to be able to go in, plug in their own images and logos. We have some clients that do have like web developers and get fancy on those, but most, like myself even, just pulling in their own photos and logos, matching the hex codes to their colors, and having something set up like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I see a couple comments which I completely, I mean, I love raising a hand on this, like asking about pricing or investment beyond what you're already doing with your current solutions. Really want to honor those and just say that the best thing that we can do is we'd love to talk to you about that in follow up, and also to mention that as we coordinate and work, Dakxo loves working with, and I say that as somebody who truly, I'm just gonna say me, loves working with other partners and developing things for you guys and tools for you guys to use. So when it comes to anything like us being able, our solutions being able to integrate with text or being able to work well with Funraise, we always want to make sure that we know that we are addressing those any questions that you have around pricing to be really industry standard, to cover the things that we need to do in order to provide them to you and make sure they're really best and operational. So that's always a conversation that we're willing to have, 100%, like, able to follow up on any of that. Any questions? Let's see. Yeah, so I see some of those. We will be happy to have that conversation. Other questions that we want in here to do. Let's see, integration dates. All right, well, for those of you who are still on, if there are any other pieces, I will go through again as we're presenting. Danny and I kind of scrolling through the chat. We will make sure if there isn't something that we addressed, that we close the loop with contacting you on the answers to those questions. Really want to leave you with the fact that we are so excited to be able to work really closely together, and to partner and work with many of the wonderful solutions in the nonprofit space so that each of you can succeed. And it's been a pleasure to spend this afternoon with you. So thank you so much again for your time and your hard work and all that you do for your organizations.
Yep. I second that. Thanks everybody for being so lively in the group chat. It's what I will say too is you will get a copy of this webinar after this. So if there's anything you missed or details you want to reference back to, you can do that. And again, feel free to reach out to me if you have questions about anything on the Funraise side. I'd be happy to answer questions. We have a few different packages that can be tied in with the Dakxo platform. Be happy to kind of determine what makes the most sense for you. And then, of course, if you have questions for the Dakxo team, I'm sure you have a representative there, but of course, Constance, I'm sure is a great reference or resource for you also.